What's up, guys? 3-0 yesterday. The Knicks probably was the luckiest one. I mean, they were losing by double digits at halftime, but they did have a huge second half to wind up winning and covering that game. I mean, again, I do think they are the better team in the series, even though I think they kind of had their escape in game one. Although maybe you could argue they had escapes in both games. They had such a good second half, they didn't really need as much of an escape in that game last night. It was a very high scoring game. So you'd expect that to favor the Pacers, but the Pacers they were really not good defensively, man. So the Knicks got there, and then both baseball plays got there. Both of those teams were ahead for most of the game, really. Kansas City and Texas Rangers with Jack Leiter. Is that his name? Jake. I think it's Jack. Leiter was the better starting pitcher in that matchup between him and Beto. Although the game wound up looking pretty close, but Texas did lead throughout that game. Leiter didn't have the best performance, but he outpitched Beto, and then it almost sounds like libido. Yeah, this guy's got a huge sex drive, man. Texas had a 12-7 lead going into the ninth inning in that game, I believe, and it wound up 12-11. They almost blew it, giving up 4 runs in the bottom of the ninth, I think, to an Oakland team that is pretty inept offensively, but it still got there. So 3-0, I like that. Hell yeah. We'll move on to today. Let's see. I was using a different app. I was like, can I share my screen? But I guess this app does have like screen sharing capability. I should just switch over to StreamYard, man, because with the tower getting shot, I could just use our StreamYard, but I'm getting lazy. I'm just like, no, screw it. I'm just going to use these different like quick like free webcam softwares or websites, I should say, that are out there. But whatever. This one does have screen sharing ability, but I think you have to say, I'm going to share my screen the whole time. So I think you can't do it while you're like mid video, but whatever. Let's go on to today. I would have shown the market breakdown that I tend to look at, but all right, we got NHL today, of course, NHL playoffs, 2 games. I'm very tempted to play the Carolina Hurricanes here. Rangers, Carolina. Carolina's down 2-0 in this series. They're sitting at a minus 170 favorite with not really much movement on this one. I see it just sitting at 170, 62% of the tickets on Carolina, but 91% of the cash. I don't even know about that ticket percentage, really, because the Rangers have been one of the most popular pick teams in the NHL, and I would imagine that they're still pretty popular. I mean, what have they done? They've won 2 games in the series so far. So how could they be less popular than they already were? They, from the outside, they look like they're the better team in the series, but the books, the odds makers continue to tell you that's not the case. They continue to tell you Carolina is actually the better team here. If you look at what happened in those 2 games, Carolina could have won both of those games. They were both close, of course, but Carolina arguably outplayed the Rangers in both. In the second game, game 2, Carolina had a huge shot edge, shots on goal edge. I think they had 57 shots on goal because it went into a double overtime. Compared to the Rangers, I think having like around 40. Shesterkin was just like playing out of his mind, basically. He's maybe the best and or hottest goalie in the playoffs right now. Unfortunately, over Swayman, who had such a bad game last night. Bruins just had such a terrible game last night that Swayman factor might be completely gone now at this point once he's facing a team that just throws a barrage of shots at you. Very, very unfortunate. I think the Bruins are probably doomed. Carolina, I don't think so, though. So I lean to Carolina here. I mean, Shesterkin had to play like an unbelievable game, make 54 saves in the game or whatever it was. I think it was he's verging on like multiple records. I think he already has set some record for like number of games in a row for a goalie not allowing more than 3 goals. And that like 50 whatever saves in that game, I think is close to some like playoff record of some kind. Carolina was hitting them with such a barrage of shots. It was just crazy that they didn't get one to go in during that span and didn't win that game. Now the series flips to Carolina in desperation, down 0-2. I think Carolina is probably going to win this game tonight as the better team now at home. Books have lined them as a pretty decent-sized favorite. I would only lean to the Carolina side in this one, but I don't really want to lay the price of minus 170, even though it is in line with them having been like a minus 110 to minus 120 road favorite. I think you get maybe 30 cents for home ice in the playoffs. So this line is about in line with that. I'm tempted to play Carolina, to be honest. If DraftKings offered like a an alternate puck line like they do with the baseball run lines down. You could take the -1 goal. That might be the way that I would look. I don't quite want to lay the -170, but I do like Carolina here. And that, I think, is the strongest lean in these hockey games on the sides. Colorado at Dallas. Interesting game one where Dallas came out of the gate fast and we're up 3-0, but Dallas can blow leads. I mean, they're a good scoring team, not as good at preventing the opposing team from scoring, really. Oh, this fucking mic again, man. Come on. Or webcam, I mean. God damn it. Yeah, my webcam just kind of, it's very frustrating how it goes out of focus constantly. Jeez, I just can't get it back in focus. That made it worse. That's awesome. I'm Bigfoot now. I'm blurry. This is crazy. I can't believe it. There we go. All right. So Dallas, Colorado, Dallas blew that big early lead. I had mentioned that Colorado might be slow out of the gate because they'd had so much time off, but they really turned it on and showed like, hey, we're actually the better team here, which I think is accurate. Colorado wound up winning the game 4-3, I think in overtime. Both of those games, I think, went into overtime 2 nights ago. Dallas, so this is also game 2 with Colorado up 1-0 at Dallas. Dallas up from -120 to -131 now. So the books are kind of accounting for a zigzag type of spot here where Dallas lost as a home favorite. Now they expect a bounce back in game 2. I don't necessarily disagree with that. 61% of the tickets on Dallas, 67% of the cash. So you see the cash discrepancy coming in on them and the line moving up on Dallas. So market indicators on Dallas, just based on the market read, I guess, and the fact that Dallas is probably going to have the adjustments to make, I guess, agree with that and lean to the Dallas side slightly, but it's not really something I'm interested in playing. I think Colorado's the better team and should win this series, but this is probably a decent spot for Dallas to get a win. They're really going to be kind of in desperation as well, because if you fall down 0-2, like at home, you're basically fucked. So maybe not in hockey. I mean, in hockey, these are closer games, closer series, so anything can really happen. But I would slightly lean to the Dallas side, but I think Carolina is the strongest lean in hockey, to the point where I almost want to do it. NBA, first game up is Cavs Celtics, my Boston Celtics. Celtics, a giant favorite again. This time they're up from 13 to 13.5, going through the 13.5 with juice. I think they closed around 13 in game 1, up from 12.5 or something. They're definitely public, and this time it looks like the cash discrepancy is not on their side. They have 85% of the tickets, 72% of the cash, even though it looks like the line has moved up on them as well. So possibly some money has come in and driven the Celtics up. The Celtics are looking fairly unstoppable. We know in the first series they did have a lapse in the same situation, basically in game 2, after they had a blowout game 1, which I attended. Same thing in the Miami series. They came out and kind of just got really complacent and didn't play a good game in game 2. But the Heat hit 23 3-pointers in that game. The Cavs don't really have the offensive weaponry to do that. I mean, Donovan Mitchell is insanely good. Like, seeing him live is just crazy, with him just driving towards the basket, and you're like, there's no way he's going to score here. He's got 3 defenders on him, and they know that he's their scorer, and they know exactly what they're trying to do, and he'll just fling it up at this bizarre angle just over 3 guys, and like, no way that shot's going to go in. Yeah, it still goes in. Donovan Mitchell is insane, man, but the Cavs don't really have that much else beyond him. I don't know if Jared Allen is finally coming back on this one to kind of help them at the big man spot. Celtics haven't really been suffering much without Porzingis, really. They had Al Horford starting, and they gave him a lot of rest. The Celtics, very, very deep team. They had, I think, 7 guys scoring in double digits in game 1. They have a lot of depth. And when Horford came out, they used Luke Cornett, who missed, I think, at least one of the Miami games. He missed the one that I went to, but they need him with Porzingis out, and he played pretty well in that first game, man. He is not doing badly, really, filling in that role there. So the Celtics have some big men that can kind of fill in there. And Cornette is 7'1", so at least he gives them some size there as well. And he did not play badly in that game. So I don't even know if I have a lean on the side, really. I mean, the odds makers are lining this, I think, pretty much accurately. They're padding the Celtics a little bit, maybe. So I don't think there's really going to be value in laying that huge price with the Celtics, especially after a blowout game 1 where you might expect some adjustments to be made there. So I guess the slight lean would be to take the points with the Cavs in this particular spot, but I'm not going to get involved in that. The stronger play, I think, would be to play the Dallas Mavericks in the other game. Mavericks Thunder. This game inexplicably has moved from 3.5 to 5. I think it's inexplicable, but maybe there are some injuries that I'm not totally aware of here. I mean, Luke, I assume he's still playing, but he looks like he's playing injured, man. He is not 100%. So that is affecting Dallas, and it's really kind of hard to quantify. Come on, man. I was just trying to look at the Mavericks situation here. So Dallas really, I thought they were in a decent spot in game one, and they really got blown out. Yeah, Luka Doncic, he's listed as a game time decision. I mean, I would expect him to get in there again. I mean, they need him in the playoffs. He's been playing through whatever these injuries are, but he's obviously not 100%. He's definitely being affected by it. How much of an effect is that going to have? I don't know. But the Thunder are now 5-point favorite coming off a blowout game one. And the Thunder, as I said, they don't have the experience edge in this series. So that's one thing that the Mavs have going for them. The Thunder, I mean, they do have now a series and one extra game under their belts. It might start catching up to them more when they have to play a team on the road that actually plays well at home, because that is not New Orleans, who does not play well at home. But in this spot, I still think the zigzag is appropriate here, because the books have just jumped the line from 3.5 to 5. Thunder are public, which I expected them to be public in game one, and they weren't. But now they are after a blowout win. 55% of the tickets, but only 50% of the cash. So the cash actually evenly split. So it does look like the discrepancy is on Dallas, the cash discrepancy on Dallas here. I agree with that in the zigzag. I expect them to be the team that has the adjustments to make after just getting blown out. And I think them having certain edges here. I'm only convinced that Oklahoma City is the slightly better team over Dallas. And I think maybe that just gets a little bit more, that becomes a little bit more the case with Luka dealing with some injuries. But the line may be a little bit too high at this point. I think maybe about 4 would probably be about appropriate. This line a bit too high in a spot like this. So the lean would be to taking the points with Dallas. The total, by the way, in the Celtics Cavs is down from 213.5 to 211.5 juice to the over. 54% of the tickets on the under somehow, but 71% of the cash on the over. I don't envision the public actually coming in on unders in these games like this, especially in a Celtics game where they hit a ton of three-pointers and have a lot of offensive weapons. Don't really see that being the case, but in game twos and then Mavs Thunder, the line's down from 218.5 to 218. 78% of the tickets and the cash on the over, so the over does look public in that one. But these game twos, quick turnaround time, you might get a little, slightly less intense defense, but the books do account for that by shifting the line, I think, to some extent, a little bit higher. But game two tends to be a little bit higher scoring than game one, is what I'll say. Obviously, I'm not playing the totals in either of these games. Moving to Major League Baseball, it's a Thursday, so we have a shortened card, and we have most of these teams, more than half of the games, I think, the series are actually just continuing. And I'm going to play on a couple of the other games that we have here. What I will say is that I do lean to the under in the Seattle-Minnesota game. I think an under does look like a good play there, but that line is very low now. It's gone down from 7 juice to the over down to 6.5 juice to the over. And I think you can still find under 7s out there right now, but 55% of the tickets on the over in that one and 69% of the tickets on the under. The issue with that one, even though the bullpen situation actually isn't that bad after yesterday's game between Seattle and Minnesota, neither team used their bullpens to that much of a degree, but everybody kind of just knows at this point, Logan Gilbert and Pablo Lopez, they're both good pitchers. So that's obviously being factored into this totals, where to the point where I think the total is about right. Even though as low as it is, I still like the under in that one. Neither of these offenses are that dangerous, really, especially not Minnesota's. And both of these pitchers pretty good, and I think they both have decent history against the opposing lineups too. So I do like the under, and it seems like you might find a little bit of an edge. Well, we're looking at the number here. The fact that it's 7, I don't think you're getting that much of an edge in the number here, but you might have expected it to come out a little bit higher just because Lopez's ERA doesn't look as good as he actually is. He has an ERA above 4 right now, which I expect to drop based on his whip and all his other numbers and how he's pitched in recent seasons. He is better than that. His ERA not really indicative of how well he's pitched. So I like the under there. I am going to a different under, though, or I think we might have a little bit of extra value, even though the market looks like it's against it in this one. I'm just like, yeah, I'll just do it anyway. That's going to be this Arizona-Cincinnati game. This is sitting at 9, juice to the over, and it's just kind of sitting at that number, which I find to be a little bit high based on the starting pitching matchup. 56% of the tickets look like they're on the over, and 90% of the cash on the over. That scares me a little bit, the fact that the cash discrepancy is on the over here. But again, I'm looking at the starting pitching matchup and thinking the under has to be the play here. You have the game yesterday. Neither team really used that much of their pen yesterday. Both teams used 3 relievers and left some of their better relievers available for today's game. Some of the better relievers got into the game and some didn't really for both teams. So I don't think that the bullpen situation is enough to keep you off of playing an under at the 9 here. But of course, where this really comes in is, and it was a 4-3 game yesterday. It was a close game, so you would have thought maybe the bullpens would have been used a little bit more than they were, but they weren't used that heavily yesterday. But where this really becomes a play here is with the starting pitching matchup. And here I think you have a misleading ERA on Slade Ciccone for Arizona Diamondbacks. He's got a 4.96 ERA this year. So on the surface, people are going to look at that and think, oh, this guy's not very good. And look at, man, he got roughed up in that most recent start against San Diego. He gave up 6 earned runs. Yeah, that's true. He gave up 2 home runs. Didn't have a good start, that's for sure. But his other 2 starts, he allowed 2 and 1 earned run. And those were against the Giants and Seattle. So San Diego, maybe a little bit of a better offense than those 2, I guess. We're able to get to him a bit. But I think he kind of bounces back in this one, man, because the rest of his stats on the season so far look good, man. He's got a 0.8 whip, even factoring in that bad start where he gave up 5 hits, 2 walks, and 4 1/3. Still struck out 4, and he does still have a good whip. He's got 15 strikeouts and 16 1/3. That's not too bad. And 3 walks. So the strikeout walk ratio is good. The number of walks maybe slightly high. He's allowed 3 home runs. So that's got to come down. But those home runs are jacking his ERA up, I think, higher than it would be otherwise. And 2 of those were in that most recent start. So other than that, he allowed 1 home run. And he's allowed 10 hits at 16 1/3. So that's good. He's not allowing many hits. So Ciccone, he's a young guy, man. He's 24. He made his debut last year. He had 4 starts, 3 relief appearances last year. And his ERA last year was also misleading at 4.33 because he had a 1.15 whip, which was good. A 20-4 strikeout walk ratio was good, even though he pitched 27 innings. So he's not a guy coming in putting up really high strikeout numbers, but it tells you he's got pretty good command, man. He doesn't walk a lot of guys, keeps his whip low. So I like that. Like if he's able to stop allowing home runs, allow the ball to stay in the yard, he's pretty good, man. So coming into this game, Cincinnati did actually face him last year at one point. It's a very small sample size, though. 10 at-bats against him. They're 3 for 10 with a strikeout, no walks, no extra base hits. So it is a 300 batting average, but a very small sample size. So I don't think there's that much to take away from that. And with the not allowing any extra base hits and no walks either, actually, it's only a 600 OPS. That's a pretty low OPS, especially given the fact that it's a 300 batting average. But again, a small sample size. So these guys have seen him once, so maybe he'll have a little bit less of an edge with these guys having seen him once before, but they haven't seen him this year yet either. They saw him last year, so they're still kind of unfamiliar with him. So I like Ciccone to kind of bounce back from that previous start. I think he's a pretty decent pitcher based on all of his stats. His ERA should be like lower than what it is. And then Hunter Green, I like him, man. I think he's been kind of an undervalued commodity as well because he hasn't really turned it on yet as far as his career is concerned. But it looks like he may be doing that this year where now his ERA is down to 3.12. So maybe he's not much of a secret anymore. 1.17 whip on the season. His whip on his career, just because last year it was really bad at 1.42. The year before that, his debut season where he pitched almost a full season as a starter, he had a 1.21 whip, so that's not bad. The 1.42 last year was bad, but it's starting to look like that was more of an outlier as he seems to be returning more to what he did in 2022, and his ERA is better than it was. And his ERA has been in the 4s both of the other years, even though his whip in 2022 kind of indicated that his ERA should have been maybe a little bit lower than it was. But now his ERA is lower, and he's still putting up big strikeout numbers, man. He's a strikeout guy. He's got some stuff where he can really fool hitters. 47 strikeouts in 40 1/3 innings. That's pretty good this season. That's a good strikeout rate. His strikeout rate has been pretty similar for his whole career so far. like averaging over 9 per 9 innings. Pretty high strikeout stuff, high strikeout numbers. Does tend to get a little bit wild and walk too many, but this year maybe it hasn't been quite as bad as in previous seasons. I mean, his whip is pretty good, 1.17 whip this season. He's allowed 16 walks so far this season, which is a little bit high, but it's not as bad as what we've seen in the past out of him. And he's only allowed 31 hits in the 4 and a third innings too. So he's kept the hits down as well. He's pitched pretty well, man. I mean, he has kind of like zigzagged good and bad starts, though. But in his most recent start, that was kind of a spot where he would have been in line for a bad start. And he did walk 4 guys, which wasn't good, but he kept Baltimore off the scoreboard, man. He allowed no runs. And then the bullpen kind of blew it for him. So, and given that Baltimore's a pretty good offense, man, that was a pretty good performance out of Hunter Greene. So I like Hunter Greene overall, man. He's been pretty good this season so far. He has gone fairly deep into most games. He's gone at least 6 innings in all but 3 of his starts. That's not bad. And he's gone at least 5 2/3 in all but 2 of them. Pretty good. And he's allowed more than 2 earned runs, I should say, only twice against 2 pretty good offenses in the Brewers and the Phillies. And in both of those games, he had good strikeout walk ratios too. So, and didn't even really allow that many hits. So it was like, I don't know. Milwaukee had 2 home runs off him. Philly didn't hit home runs off him, although he walked 2 guys in that one. But still, it's like the runs that he gave up in those, he could have allowed fewer runs based on his other statistics in those games. So I like Hunter Greene, man. And against Arizona, not a huge sample size, but they're 6 for 25 off him lifetime with 2 doubles, no other extra base hits, 9 strikeouts and 4 walks is kind of in line with what he does. He does walk too many, but he strikes out a lot of guys. It amounts to a 240 opponent batting average against these Arizona hitters. Even though Arizona's been turning it on offensively recently, he's held them decently in check, and it's a 665 OPS off him, which isn't really that high either. So all that kind of amounts to me liking the under in this one, man. So we can go under 9 in that one. And then the other game I'm going to get to here. So we actually have 2 games where we've seen a lot of line movement, flipping the road underdog to a favorite. We've seen that happen in the Kansas City and Anaheim game, which is a game I'm not going to get involved in. Kansas City in that one is flipped from plus 102 to minus 115 as a road favorite. 75% of the tickets on them, 86% of the cash on the Kansas City side. So we do see cash discrepancy on Kansas City and a lot of movement flipping them to the favorite. So you do have to pay attention when you see market movement like that. It is Michael Wacha pitching for Kansas City, and he has really good numbers against Anaheim's hitters over his career, man. Like, very good numbers. Like, I think they have a below 100 batting average against him in like 40-something at bats. So he has really completely held Anaheim's hitters down. So that is a good indicator for Kansas City. But I would not want to play the full game on this one at the very least, because Kansas City used 6 relievers yesterday in that win over Milwaukee. That was a big win, and they were able to take the series against Milwaukee. And now they're traveling out to the West Coast for a late game. So it's not exactly the best spot for Kansas City, I wouldn't say. So that would give me a little bit of pause on that one. And Reed Detmer's pitching for LA. He's kind of regressed a bit. It's a hot start, but I still think he's a pretty good pitcher. Not somebody I would really want to fade necessarily, although his numbers against Kansas City's hitters are not as good as Wacha's are against LA's hitters. So that would also be an indicator towards playing Wacha in this spot. LA is also not in a very good spot. They're returning home from a road trip, actually, so they're also having to travel back to the West Coast. So both of these teams actually are having to go out to the West Coast. And actually, it's even worse for Anaheim, actually, because they're coming back from the Eastern time zone, whereas Kansas City is at least starting a road trip on this one, which tends to be kind of a more focused spot. And they're only going out from the Central time zone, so a little bit less of a dramatic time zone change for Kansas City. So there are some factors here that point to Kansas City, but the fact that they burned out their bullpen and beat a good Brewers team yesterday kind of puts them in a little bit of a letdown spot too, I think. So I don't like that. I don't like that necessarily for Kansas City. And if you were going to play this, it would be entirely because Wacha has good stats against Anaheim, and because Anaheim is returning home from a road trip. So I think it would make more sense to play the starting pitching matchup in this one and not have to deal with Kansas City's burned out bullpen here. So that's the way I would probably do it if I was going to do this one. I do agree with the Kansas City side, I guess, generally, very slightly, but I would play it first 5 inning in that one just to take it down to just getting Waka against a team that he does really well against. Anaheim did also use 4 of their relievers and use some of their better relievers, and their bullpen's not that great to begin with anyway, so that is a factor as well. The game I'm actually going to play, though, is the other game where we're seeing similar line movement. St. Louis has flipped from plus 105 as an underdog all the way to minus 124 as a favorite. It's getting to the point where you might want to lay the run line with St. Louis. You can probably lay the St. Louis run line minus 1 at like plus 100 or something. Or looking at this, you can still get them at minus 124, it looks like. So that's actually not too bad either. I probably wouldn't want to lay more than that. I would probably switch to laying a run line on this. I like the spot for St. Louis, even though I don't know if I necessarily like going against a young starting pitcher that they've never seen before. That's the one drawback here, but everything else and the market is all putting me on the St. Louis side here. St. Louis is public. They have 69% of the tickets, but they have 84% of the cash on them. So we basically know that more of the cash is coming in on St. Louis because we've seen the line flip them to the favorite, and we do see significant live movement on the St. Louis side here. Some of it might have to do with the fact that it opened. Maybe this line opened before yesterday's games, though, so maybe some of this has to do with the fact that the starting pitching matchup, the starting pitcher for St. Louis has changed here because it was going to be projected to be probably whoever they're pitching in tomorrow's game. But yesterday, St. Louis had a rain out. So now Sonny Gray, who was going to pitch yesterday, I was actually going to be on him yesterday. His start is now moved to today. So he's now pitching. So that might have also affected why this line had moved a little bit. But I still think that we see a cash discrepancy on St. Louis. And I still think there has been some line movement on St. Louis after we knew that he was the starting pitcher. So I do think some of that is still legit line movement here. Even though, yes, if Sonny Gray wasn't going to be the starting pitcher in this game, and now he is, and he's probably better than whoever was announced, whoever was going to be scheduled to pitch this game before yesterday's St. Louis rain out, then yeah, I mean, that would also move the line up a little bit on St. Louis. But I do like the spot for St. Louis for the most part here, and the starting pitching matchup I think is okay, at least for St. Louis here, but it's more going to be a spot play than anything else here. It's going to be a full game type of play where we're taking in everything about the situation here. And it's kind of surprising that St. Louis is public because they have not been doing anything right recently, man. They've lost 4 games in a row, and they've lost 6 of their last 7, and that includes losing 2 to the Tigers and losing a series to the White Sox, losing both of those series, losing 2 out of 3 to the White Sox, and then getting swept by the Mets only in a 2-game series because the third game, as I said yesterday, got postponed due to rain. I was on that game. I was on St. Louis, and it wound up being a no bet because the game didn't happen, obviously. So get your money back on that one. St. Louis, now, because of that, they actually are going to come into this game rested, though. And St. Louis, yeah, they've lost so many games in a row, and they have a worse record than Milwaukee. And people know Milwaukee is a good team and has a good record. So it's kind of strange to me that the public is actually not coming in more on the Milwaukee side, saying, oh, we get Milwaukee at home as an underdog? Holy crap, they have the better record. St. Louis has lost all these games recently. Like, it looks so easy to take Milwaukee, although maybe the public is actually looking at the starting pitching matchup here and saying, oh, Sonny Gray has this ridiculously low ERA. And yeah, there's no way that that's sustainable. That's true. Whereas Tobias Myers from Milwaukee, so maybe the public is looking at that starting pitching matchup and saying, well, Gray is the better of these 2 pitchers, which I agree. But this is mostly a spot play because I'm actually a little bit hesitant about the starting pitching matchup, which the starting pitching matchup, I guess, is probably the reason why the public is coming in a little bit on St. Louis, because I was expecting, like, this line otherwise looks pretty suspect. Like, oh, you're getting the team with the worst record that's been losing all these games recently as a road favorite. That doesn't really make sense. But, of course, it's factoring in kind of a lot, and I don't know if it's factoring in the situation enough. So St. Louis didn't play yesterday, so they had the day off, and Milwaukee, of course, did not. Milwaukee was also on the road, so they're actually returning home from a road trip, although it was a road trip all in the Central Time Zone, so I don't think that's really that much of an impact, really. They played at Chicago, at the Cubs, and then at Kansas City, so 2 series that just stayed in the Central Time Zone. Not a huge road trip for them, but they are still nonetheless returning home from a road trip, and it does fit that MLB angle where you have an underdog returning home from a road trip at home. Those teams tend to be in a bad spot when they're underdogs at home, returning home from a road trip. It tends to be a pretty negative spot for those teams, even though it is the Brewers here. I mean, they did lose to Kansas City in that series and in the last game, and they lost to the Cubs in that series as well. So you might think, well, they're returning home, they're going to bounce back. But I still think that upon returning home, you still get some of those distractions coming into play. Because even if you didn't go that far, you're still having to return to home life and whatever. So it still becomes a little bit of a distraction. And you're looking at the St. Louis team here, which, yeah, I mean, they're a division rival of yours, but they're in last place in the division, man. And they've been playing badly recently. They've fallen into last place, and Milwaukee's still in first place. So it's like, well, are you really going to pay attention when you're sitting atop first place still and you have the last place team coming in? Oh, and the other time that you saw the Cardinals this year, Milwaukee did, they went into St. Louis and swept them in pretty dramatic well, they beat them 12-5 in one of the games. And in the other two games combined, St. Louis only scored one run against them. So Milwaukee totally dominated St. Louis. So that might make Milwaukee a little bit complacent as well, thinking, hey, we handled this St. Louis team before. So that factors into the situation as well. So I think Milwaukee could overlook the St. Louis team that's at the bottom of their division, and the St. Louis team they already swept on the road. So now this becomes a little bit of road revenge for St. Louis. And St. Louis is getting to start a road trip here, which tends to be a positive focus spot. They were playing badly at home. They lost 4 straight games at home. Now they had yesterday off, so that gets to kind of halt that like negative momentum that they have, and they get to just start kind of ignoring that. Get out on the road. You have a day off now. Break up that losing momentum a little bit there. Forget about all those losses. Go out on the road. Don't listen to what the local press is saying about you. Go out on the road. Face this Brewers team, man. You're going to be focused when it's the Brewers and they're the top team in the division. So that all looks good to me, man. Situationally, this is a pretty strong situational these are some strong situational angles in play here on the St. Louis side. So I do like it. So that's why I'm going to be on St. Louis here for the most part. In Milwaukee, like I said, yeah, they did play yesterday where St. Louis did not. So Milwaukee, in that loss to the Royals, did have to use some of their relievers, even though they didn't burn their bullpen as much as the Royals did. The Royals used 6 relievers, man. That's crazy. They torched their bullpen to that degree. Milwaukee still did use 3 of their relievers, so they used some of their bullpen as well. Whereas, of course, St. Louis's bullpen is going to be in the better rest spot now because they didn't have to play yesterday. So we got a more rested bullpen for St. Louis going as well. And we probably have the pitcher who's going to go deeper into the game, which I think is a big factor here. So Sonny Gray, I tend to not like older guys. And again, I said he's got ridiculous stats this year. I mean, I talked about him yesterday. 0.89 ERA, 0.86 whip. I mean, that's going to regress. But even if it does, like look at his overall career stats, man. 3.42 ERA over his entire career. Last year with Minnesota, 2.79 and a 1.15 whip. He pitched well in those recent 2 seasons with Minnesota, really very similar stats in both those seasons. He's just been good overall, even though, yeah, of course he's going to regress from a 0.89 ERA, but still, his whip has been in the 1.1s last couple seasons. He's 1.2 over his career. His strikeout walk numbers have been okay. He's struck out almost as many batters as innings pitched, which isn't terrible. He's been a decent strikeout guy throughout his career. And this season, man, he's really had it going for him. He's got 38 strikeouts and 5 walks this season. And he's kept the ball in the yard, only allowing 1 home run. So he's really been excellent this year. Only allowing 5 walks, 21 hits in 30 1/3 innings, 38 strikeouts. So his strikeout numbers have actually been higher this year. The last time he faced Milwaukee, he actually did really well against him. He had 12 strikeouts in 6 1/3, 1 walk, and allowed 2 earned runs on 5 hits. But they actually lost the game because he got no run support behind him. So he pitched well against them, and he might want to even bounce back from that. But it does mean Milwaukee just saw Sonny Gray. So that gives you a little bit of hesitation there just for that fact. So that is going to be a slight advantage to Milwaukee. So again, I said the one hesitation here is the starting pitching matchup. Milwaukee did see him, and historically they've actually been good against him. So even factoring in that bad hitting performance from Milwaukee in that most recent start for Sonny Gray, Milwaukee is lifetime 16 for 60 off him with 4 doubles, a triple, 2 homers, 22 strikeouts, and 12 walks. So it's a lot of strikeouts, but a lot of walks. It's a 267 batting average and an 856 OPS. So the OPS is a little bit high. The 267 batting average is pretty mediocre. So it doesn't have you leaning one way or the other necessarily, but Milwaukee is familiar with him, and they did see him a couple starts ago for him. So that gives you a little bit of hesitation. And you might also argue that his stats this year are so good because he's faced some weak offenses in the White Sox, Oakland, and the Mets. Yeah, that's true. He did also face Milwaukee and Philly, and he didn't do bad in those games either, and they have pretty good offenses. So it has been a mix. But I think he's going to be able to go deeper into this game. I mean, he's a veteran. He's been pitching really well so far this year. He's up against Myers, who has a 6.23 ERA so far this year. But Myers does have the edge, which I always talk about, where St. Louis is, St. Louis has never faced him before because he's a rookie. He's making his major league his debut season here, man. And he's a decent prospect. I like him, even though he's 25. I think his major league debut was actually delayed. I think he was the guy I talked about where he had Tommy John surgery. A little bit of that TJ surgery going on there that kind of delayed his development. But it looks like that probably hasn't hurt him that much. He hasn't done horribly so far in the majors, but he hasn't been great either. And he hasn't gone that deep into games so far. And he's faced a tall task for sure. Like his first start, he faced Pittsburgh. Not really that much of a strong lineup there, and he pitched pretty well there and went 5 innings. Second start, he had to face the Yankees, which that's a brutal task. And he did have 5 strikeouts, no walks, and gave up 4 earned runs. That's actually pretty admirable. And then he had his worst start against the Cubs, who also are a pretty good hitting team. And he only made it 3 innings in that one and really kind of gave it up and walked 4 guys, 4 earned runs. So I don't know if it's just because Chicago has a good offense or maybe because there's tape on this guy now. Hitters are kind of starting to be able to figure him out. I don't really know. But he is still a young guy that has decent stuff. So I do think there is kind of a hidden edge slightly for Milwaukee here in the starting pitching matchup. But I think that just overall the situation, as I described, is good enough for a play on St. Louis here. And I expect Myers to probably not be able to go deeper than maybe like 5 innings in this one if he has like the best performance you can probably expect out of him. So far this season, yeah, he does have a 6.23 ERA and 1.31 whip, which is not great. I mean, that whip is kind of indicative of ERA. His ERA shouldn't be quite as high as it is because he did give up a couple home runs, I think. And I do think he's going to get better. I mean, he's a young guy. Maybe there are some nerves coming in as well, though his first start was actually his best. But I do think we're going to see some decent things out of Myers, but I lean towards the veteran here, even though in Sonny Gray, because I think he can go deeper into the game. He's been pitching really well so far this year. And I don't see reason for that not to at least continue to some extent. Although, again, we expect some regression. But I don't expect just like an outright collapse, really, even though Milwaukee did just see him. So, again, yeah, there is that slight edge maybe towards Myers here. But I think if Myers doesn't go as deep as Gray does in this one and Milwaukee has the less rested bullpen in this one, the odds makers are indicating something to you, man, by giving you St. Louis as a favorite price here, and the fact that the money seems to also still just be coming in on that side. So I think there are those indicators there. So I'm going to be on the St. Louis side for those reasons there. That's going to do it for me, even though, yes, I do think that the stats on the 2 starting pitchers there, the ERAs, are misleading to some extent, and we're going to see more of a move back to the mean, but it's quite likely that you still see Sonny Gray wind up having better numbers at the end of the season on this season than Myers does. I mean, Myers could have like pretty decent stats to end the season and still not be quite as good as Gray has been the last couple of seasons. So Gray still may be the better of these 2 overall pitchers, even though Myers, I mean, when you talk about these young guys who have never been seen before, you're looking for that hidden edge there where it's like, oh, this guy has never been seen before. He's going to have this good stuff these opposing hitters haven't seen before. So it's going to be a slight edge to them. But you want that to happen in a situation where that team's going to have like that situational edge, and maybe they're facing like a bad pitcher on the other side as well, and their team's in a better spot. That's not the case here, man. So we'll take advantage of the situation here. It's a full game because I think the starting pitching is actually the worst part of this. Even though I think maybe Gray still has a slight edge, arguably it could be maybe like a toss-up between the starting pitchers here, maybe. But I still think that the situational edge goes to St. Louis in all those other factors that I laid out. So St. Louis will be the other play there. So those 2 official plays are the under in the Arizona-Cincinnati game, under 9, which it looks like finally that line actually moved off of the 9 juice to the over, and it's now down to a straight 9. So if you have a straight 9, you're doing pretty well, man. That's a boner joke. All right. And the other game is going to be on the St. Louis Cardinals, minus 120 or whatever you can get on that one. somewhere in that price. Or if you want to start looking towards the run line, I don't mind that either. It's going to do it for me, man. Let's have a good one. Peace out.